Hi, I'm Lara, and this is Trope Trilogy, and today I will be telling you my top 5 least favorite romance tropes. So I decided to film outside because I am pet sitting and this yard is beautiful, and also because I wanted to make everyone up north jealous and feel bad because the weather's so nice here. I'm wearing shorts. Take that, northerners. What? Okay, sorry about that. It's really nice. Yesterday it was freezing though, so the weather is kind of inconsistent. Now, in 2019, I did a video called Top 13 Tropes About Falling in Love. And this video featured the 13 most common ways characters fell in love in the books that I read. And I ranked them from my least favorite to favorite and then discussed each one individually. So I will link that video down below if you want to see it, because I talk about a bunch of tropes on there and I will be repeating none of them for this video. So insta love, sex equals love, love triangles, all the stuff is in that video. So if you want to see me talk about the ones I dislike and eventually the ones I do like, you should watch that. So again, all the tropes in this video are ones I have never discussed before. However, I will admit I hate every single one of these tropes more than the ones in that video. The only one in that video I would have considered putting in this one would be insta-love. Yes, I hate these ones more than love triangle. I wouldn't even have put love triangles in this video, even without that rule that I couldn't repeat any. Also, I want to clarify that when I say romance in this video, I do not mean genre romance. I mean romantic relationships between two fictional characters in books or really any work of fiction. So I'm not talking about the genre, and every time I use the word romance in this video, assume that I am talking about a romantic relationship between characters unless I specify genre romance. Also, sorry if they're making a lot of noise. I was gonna say they're trying to murder each other, but now Slick is giving his brother kisses, so I don't know. Anyway, let's start the list. Number 5, the Masochism Tango. So I think the best way to describe this trope would actually just to read the quote of it on the TV Tropes page, so I will do that now. Two characters are supposed to be deeply in love, despite being blatantly unsuited for each other. They are constantly screaming at each other or worse, and yet the characters insist they like each other. Very often, the only indicator of the characters' affection for each other will be their jealousy when the other shows an interest, real or imagined, in a character outside of the tango. Now, the TV Tropes page does specify that this trope applies to both couples that are not intended to be like this when the writer wants the reader to find it romantic, and for couples when it's intentional and it is supposed to be depicting an unhealthy relationship. Now, for this least favorite trope, I am not talking about it being intentionally done, because I personally think every type of relationship should be explored in fiction, but I do not think every type of relationship should be romanticized. So this trope is only my least favorite when it's being romanticized, not if it's intentional, and also if the characters do fight, but it's actually considered a flaw with the relationship that they either have to overcome or succumb to, that is different. I don't mind if you write a work of fiction when there's a whole revolution going on and the protagonist and their love interest don't agree exactly on everything, and they argue and they have to figure out if they're really on the same side and what to do about it, and eventually they realize how to come together. If it's supposed to be for the greater story and it's supposed to be because the love interest is their own interest in characters with their own values and background, that is actually interesting, is fine. So this trope has a lot of caveats, which is why it's only number 5. I don't necessarily read books for self-insert, and I like romances that are compelling, so I would much prefer a love interest who does have their own opinion on some things, as opposed to a satellite love interest whose sole reason for existence is to agree with the protagonist and to worship. However, in those examples, the fighting isn't what's supposed to be steamy, the fighting is supposed to be compelling. I just dislike when fighting is what is considered passionate. I don't like how some works of fiction misconstrue being passionate for someone and passionate about your love for someone with fighting with them. I don't necessarily enjoy that. And personally, I find in a lot of works of fiction, when they try to do the whole they fight a lot but they love each other, it usually feels like two shallow characters, because the only good thing a lot of times the protagonist thinks about their love interest is how hot they are. Maybe the love interest calls them hot. So they're talking about how much they hate this person, but then they'll mention how hot they are every once in a while fighting. And to me, I see it as, oh, you only like them because they're good looking, because you hate everything else about them. So yeah, that's why I'm not a fan. And I think a really good example of fighting being conflated with passion is an episode from the show New Girl, and that episode is Tomato in season 1, episode 22. In this episode, the protagonist Jess sets up a dinner with her boyfriend Russell and his ex-wife because she's dumb. Russell is an older man and his relationship with Jess is very nice and happy. However, once they go out to dinner, Russell and his ex instantly start making snide remarks at each other until it escalates to a screaming match with them face to face. It's filmed in a way that parallels a lot of scenes before characters are about to kiss in many movies, such as in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where him and Elsa are insulting each other and yelling at each other face to face right before they kiss. However, unlike in that movie, Russell and his ex don't kiss because they're not passionately preparing to make out. They're legitimately fighting because they don't like each other. Jess is the one watching the two of them, thinking about how passionate they are, and she's jealous of that passion. Later on, when Jess and Russell are alone, she keeps trying to pick a fight with him, and he keeps brushing it off, clearly annoyed, until she keeps pushing and pushing, and he finally snaps at her, and she instantly gets awkward because being yelled at someone is not a good feeling. It wasn't what she was expecting. Jess finally admits that she saw that spark between Russell and his ex, and she envies that spark. She wants it with him too. And Russell responds that passion is overrated. And then I'm on the couch watching the show, eating my popcorn, being like,
I want what you and Uli have.
Stop being stupid, Jess!
you can be passionate without fighting. They aren't the same thing. So the two of them end up breaking up, which I think is fine. They actually didn't really have that much of a passion. However, the episode ends with Jess going back to her apartment, and she ends up fighting with her roommate Nick, which is used to foreshadow that they will eventually become a couple. And again, I'm in the back watching this being like, what type of relationship foreshadowing is this? They're fighting and I'm supposed to want them to get together? Eventually in the series, Jess and Nick do to get together, and then eventually they break up. And they break up because they realize they don't really have anything in common except for the fact they love each other. Okay, bye-bye, baby. So this isn't necessarily the worst example, except I do know, and I haven't gotten this far, that they end up getting together in their end game for the show, which is not surprising. So depending on if they change any and they learn from their past mistakes and they become a healthier couple, maybe this is actually a good example of characters overcoming that fighting. However, I think Jess's specific perspective reflects a lot of issues I have with other works of fiction where it takes Jess's perspective seriously. And I think the episode The Tomato kind of reflects her perspective by ending with ooh, they're fighting, that means they're gonna get together. And I'm just like, but why? Why is this a thing? That was so blatantly weird, where it was clearly like, oh, since they scream at each other, they're gonna get together. And I'm just like, but why does this protagonist want someone she can scream in the face of? Why is this a goal? Anyway, next trope. Number 4, the green-eyed monster. This trope's name is pretty self-explanatory, and that is when a character is excessively jealous. Now, I will say this trope isn't exclusive to romance. However, I think it's really common in romantic relationships in fiction, and I think it's especially annoying in romantic relationships when it's done in a way to show that the love interest cares for the protagonist, or when the protagonist cares for the love interest by being jealous. It's like, there are other ways to show that you love someone by being excessively jealous and kind of crazy. Isn't that right? He shows that he loves me because he's purring and he's a happy little baby. That's how he shows he loves me. Not by punching all the other cats in the face so they can't get pet either. My reason for especially disliking it in a romance is that Romantic relationships are supposed to be built on trust. And if you don't trust someone not to cheat on you, either they're not worthy of your trust, or more often in works of fiction, you are not giving them the trust that they deserve, and therefore you're the one not treating them right. And in works of fiction, this often results the jealous partner being borderline abusive to their partner, if not straight up abusive. They constantly interrogate their partner and their partner's friends, they isolate their partner, or they even punish their partner for things out of their control. And sometimes they even put their jealousy above their partner's well-being. So romantic. This is often done with male characters to show them as protective without giving them any emotionally healthy qualities, or it's done with female characters to make them feel vulnerable because, oh, they're so scared and insecure. It's adorable. And again, you can write this where you know it's a bad thing as a genuine study of an abusive relationship, or you could give it as a flaw to one of your characters that they need to overcome. However, a lot of times in fiction, it's not considered a flaw. And my example for the green-eyed monster is going to be Layla from The Savior's Champion by Jenna Maressi. I didn't have to say an author for the TV show. Now I do. So I will say that there were aspects about this relationship that I enjoyed at the beginning of the book. I was really rooting for them. However, it was Layla's extreme jealousy that turned this cute, albeit cheesy romance into an extremely unhealthy one. I actually did enjoy Layla's shyness about getting into the relationship. It was her first relationship, so I found that part to be relatively realistic and also kind of cute, which I'm gonna get into spoilers now, but Tobias, her love interest, who is the protagonist, is fighting in a death tournament where the only way to live essentially is to marry the savior. Now there's two exceptions where characters got to leave, but he didn't get these exceptions, so he has to win to survive, and winning means marrying the savior. Now the spoilery part is that Layla's actually the savior. So if he wins, he's supposed to marry her. However, Layla's sister, Cosima, is pretending to be the savior, which means when Tobias finally wins a challenge, he ends up going off alone with Cosima as his reward. However, literally nothing happens because despite Cosima coming on to Tobias, he doesn't want anything to happen because he likes Layla. However, just the fact that the two of them were alone throws Layla into a jealous rage, and she pretty much tells Tobias she's done with him for being alone in a room with another woman because he won a challenge to prevent himself from dying. Seems a bit unreasonable of a reaction to me, but what do I know? So to make it up to her, Tobias purposely loses the next challenge. And luckily, this isn't a challenge where you die for losing. This is one where only the loser doesn't get to go hang out with everyone else, so it's a perfect opportunity for him to be alone with Leia. Yes, there's a lot of plot convenience in this story to get them alone with each other when at the beginning of the story it wasn't even necessary because they found ways to sneak off, but now there's just plot convenience, but that's unrelated to why this romance became unhealthy. However, because Tobias purposely lost, Layla forgives him, and Tobias continues to purposely lose challenges in what is supposed to be a death tournament. Now, this overall undermines the entire stakes of the tournament if he can purposely lose but still not die. However, in the context of the relationship and in the context of Layla's character, this portrays her as someone who cares more about keeping Tobias to herself than she does about him not dying. Like, if she had to choose between Tobias being more likely to die or sitting in a room next to Cosima, she's like, just get closer to death. That I'm more comfortable with that. And it's like, Layla, that is such a messed up thing to do. That is so selfish of you. I don't believe that she cares about him as a person. It seems more like she cares about him as an object to keep to herself. And one scene later on that really bothers me is when they're all eating dinner together and Cosima puts her hand on Tobias's thigh, and she is who he believes to be the savior, who is the ruler of the kingdom and could execute him on a whim, and he does nothing because the ruler is putting her hand on his thigh and he can do nothing about it. And Layla, who could actually do something to protect him, instead leaves and then gets mad at him for essentially being assaulted. If this was gender bent and you were reading a book where an evil king put his hand on the female protagonist's leg and she was extremely uncomfortable with it, and her love interest got mad at her for some guy who she can't go against because he rules the kingdom touching her leg, no one would be like, oh, he cares about her so much. Everyone would be like, what a piece of crap. Because that's a thing a piece of crap would do. But even with it not being more noticeable and gender swapped, I still think it's relatively noticeable that Layla is treating him poorly because she's extremely selfish. So yeah, this trope is a great way to make your protagonist or their love interest into a selfish jerk. And I heard it gets even worse in The Savior's Sister. So yay, because I was giving the first book the benefit of the doubt that maybe she has a character arc and the author was just saving it for the novel from her perspective. But from what I heard, that's not necessarily the case, so I probably shouldn't have given the book the benefit of the doubt. I was like, maybe it'll change. Anyway, number 3. The protagonist is distracted by sexy/shallow romance. So based on my combination of a bunch of sort of tropes, this obviously isn't necessarily a specific trope as much as a thing that really bothers me that I've seen done a lot in works of fiction. And this is when the protagonist is constantly thinking about how hot their love interest is. And please, just stop. I get the point. They're hot. Stop telling me they're hot. Think about other things. What's their personality? What is happening? Stop telling me they're hot. I really don't care what they look like. I don't care what actors look like in a movie. Why would I care about what your character that's described by words on a page looks like? I really don't care if they're hot. Please give me chemistry. Please give me an emotionally driven romance. Please give me personality. It's just so annoying. Personally, looks don't matter as much to me, and it's not that you can never mention that the protagonist is hot or that their love interest is hot or that they think each other are hot. I don't mind. I do like knowing what characters look like. However, when the protagonist is constantly thinking about how hot their love interest is, it gives me the impression that they're extremely shallow. Because essentially, that's what the protagonist is constantly thinking about. I'm generally predispositioned. Is that a word? Google? No. It is not. It's not a word. I'm generally predisposed to not really be into a romance. But once it begins to feel shallow to me, the author has to do extra work to make up for the fact that I think the characters only like each other because of their looks. In fact, there are probably book romances I would have liked if the book didn't constantly stop every 5 seconds to tell me how hot the love interest was. At least maybe I would have liked them. I'll never know though, because I was too busy being annoyed with how shallow the protagonist is being. The thing is though, readers like this. At least I've seen readers who enjoy romance give reviews where they explicitly say that they enjoy having a hot love interest or hot protagonist. So this may be an unpopular opinion, so despite my rant, this probably wouldn't necessarily be the best advice if you write genre romance, because it seems like a lot of people do actually like this, and I'm just the one here being like, give me the more emotionally driven romances and stop talking about how hot everyone is. It's just as a reader who loves emotionally driven romances, when there's a constant emphasis on the physical, I get annoyed because it's not what I enjoy. However, despite this trope not being as technically bad as the last two, because it's not really abusive, it annoys me the most because it happens in almost every single fictional romantic relationship I read ever. It's just constantly in almost every book, and it's like, please stop. Please stop. I dread it the most of these tropes because I can't escape it. And my example for this is Ruby Red by Kirsten Gier. In this book, the protagonist Gwen discovers that she can time travel, and she partners with a boy named Gideon to do this.
What are you then?
The hardest.
There's more to this plot. I really don't care to explain it. He's arrogant and has been trained to do this his whole life. She knew about it but didn't believe she would be the one to be able to do it in her family line, so she's woefully unprepared. So he's this knowledgeable guy who can do all this stuff, who acts like he's so much better than her, and he's very arrogant and kind of a jerk. And she's just thinking, oh, he's a jerk all the time. That's all you need to know. If you want to know more about the book, I reviewed it years ago. I was probably more generous than I should have been because I really didn't like it at the time, but I gave it a slightly more positive review than I would now because I discounted my opinion, because back then I discounted my opinion on critiques a lot, so I would give books better reviews because I didn't think my critiques were valid, because I didn't think anything I said about not liking romance was valid, because I just generally didn't like them. So I was like, well, I'm not the target demographic, so my opinion doesn't matter. But no, I found romance I like. It's just not that one. I'll link that review everywhere. My tangent is over. Back to the point. But anyway, there are generally two things Gwen thinks about Gideon. One, he's hot. Two, he's a jerk. Did I mention that he's hot? So yeah, these two characters argue a lot, but they end up kissing at the end of the book. And I'd never really noticed them getting much nicer to each other or anything like that. They continued to argue. So to me, it felt extremely shallow. And it seemed like there were two people who really didn't like each other and only kissed because they were both attractive. Now, I don't mind if the characters argue at first, but I would have loved to see them first arguing with each other, learn to respect and trust each other, and eventually fall in love. You know, hate to love, emphasis on the two. But no, they just argue and then kiss. And the only reason I can ever believe they kissed each other was because they both found each other attractive and were both shallow. And that's what these type of romances usually boil down to me. Two hot people who get together because they're both the hottest person they happen to be around. How romantic. So I realized that in the video, I didn't give my best example for this trope being done poorly. And so the worst example of a shallow romance I've seen in a book is in Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. And this is the fourth book in the Throne of Glass series. And the reason why the one in Queen of Shadows is so exceptionally bad, though, is because in Heir of Fire, the two characters in this relationship first meet, and they are Aelin and Rowan, and they have no physical attraction. They disagree with each other, and it's a very, friendship type of growing over time, and it's extremely platonic. There's no sexual attraction. And by no sexual attraction, I mean she's literally shirtless in the scene so he can tattoo her back, and it's explicitly stated there is nothing sexual about it. They sleep in a bed together. It's explicitly stated there's nothing sexual about it. So if they were going to be initially sexually attracted to each other, it would have happened then. And then they're separated at the end of Heir of Fire. So I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was the best one in the series, or at least the least flawed. And so then in Heir of Fire, though, when they're reunited, they instantly are sexually attracted to each other. They're checking each other out. She's teasing him, wearing skimpy nightgowns and stuff. And I'm like, wait, why wasn't he getting turned on when she was literally topless before? And it doesn't make any sense. It's not, the internal logic of the book is not consistent, and the characters aren't consistent. So while I don't like this trope in general, this is the best example because I do actually think this is an objective flaw with the book. Whereas in Ruby Red, I'm sure tons of people liked that aspect of the book. I mean, I'm sure people like this aspect of the book too, but in the other one, it wasn't necessarily an objective flaw. It was different taste. It wasn't my taste. In this one, I do think it's a flaw because it doesn't fit the last book, especially because in Queen of Shadows, it retcons in two scenes that didn't happen in Heir of Fire, but it pretends they did. One is it says something like he released his scent and then she smelled it and arched her back and was turned on by it when she was in the land with him, which it's just weird. It's very animalistic. It's not an emotionally or thoughtfully driven romance. And again, if they were animalistically attracted to each other in Heir of Fire, as this scene that it said, oh yeah, he remembered back when he was training her and this happened. It's like, why was that not mentioned when we were reading that book though? it didn't make sense why the book acts like it was something that happened in the middle of it, but then it would have affected things within the story, which it did not. And then the second thing it retconned in, I just don't think fit the tone of the story and also didn't make sense. So Rowan's whole thing is he mourns the loss of his dead wife when she first meets him, and he's very sad about this. And then the book retcons in a scene that would have had to have happened after the climax of the book, but before she left at the very end. So it would have had to been between the last couple chapters. And that is when it says that they went out to dinner, her, Rowan, and his ex-girlfriend. So it would have been before his deceased wife. And she got jealous and tried to fight the girlfriend. First of all, it doesn't really fit a lot of the tone the story was building. And it's not that I'm against like fun or silly scenes, but you're trying to convince me this guy who's been mourning his whole dead wife this whole time was hanging out with his ex-girlfriend with the main character, like they're still going out to eat like casual friends. Like this brooding guy doesn't seem like the type to casually hang out with his ex-girlfriend. And even if he was, it was retconned in, and it was like, oh yeah, she was jealous of the girlfriend before she ever showed any liking of him. Now, it's not that from the end of Air with Fire they couldn't have become a romantic couple. I liked them as friends. I really liked how their friendship developed. They kind of went from enemies to friends, and that would have been awesome if they had grown into a romantic relationship more naturally. The problem is when it's explicitly stated on the page that they are not sexually attracted to each other, especially when the girl is topless at one point and they're sleeping in a bed with each other and there's no sexual tension whatsoever, and then the next book tries to build the relationship primarily on sexual tension that came out of nowhere. I'm not gonna buy it. If they had grown closer emotionally, or they had grown closer intellectually, and then start to notice these things and start to develop these feelings, it would have been fine. But it felt like 0 to 100 and like they were completely different characters. So that's why I think this is an example of it done very poorly. Also, sorry, I had to add this in and change the background. I hate doing it, but it's raining right now, so I can't go back outside and film that clip. Moving on. Number 2, romanticized cheating.
I deserve that. Giselle.
Who was she?
What? I may have deserved that.
Does this even need an explanation? This is when a couple that we're supposed to root for involves one or both of the characters cheating on their significant other. Cheating on your significant other is one of the worst things you can do to them. And the main couple being perfect for each other doesn't make it cute. The only exception I would give for this would be an extreme example where it's like an empire with an evil emperor and his wife was forced to marry him against her will, and he's, an evil emperor, and the only romance she could ever have would be cheating because she's essentially enslaved by him as his like sex slave childbearer wife thing. Or, the gender swapped one if the guy is enslaved by an evil empress. That would be a different thing. But in normal, average situations, it's not cute. It's not okay. The person doesn't deserve to be cheated on. Break up with them and then date another person. Genius. But yeah, my example for this is Again But Better by Christine Ruscio, which I reviewed, and I will link my review everywhere if you want to check it out. Anyway, in this book, the protagonist Shane develops a crush on a cute boy named Pilot, and Pilot has a girlfriend. Pilot doesn't even want to be with his girlfriend. He's just too much of a coward to break up with her. But they study abroad together, and eventually the study abroad trip devolves into Pilot just ignoring Shane once his girlfriend realizes she has a crush on him. And then years pass, and Shane ends up having a fiance who she doesn't love. So she ends up tracking down Pilot at his boring desk job to confess to him that she's in love with him. And this whole time he's been dating this same girl who he doesn't love and is too much of a coward to break up with. But he's still not going to break up with her, so he tells Shane that he is not interested, and then they end up getting thrown back in time for no particular reason, just the fairy godmother decided to throw them back in time and they're back on their study abroad trip. Now he wants to go back to the present, but she's like no, and forces him to stay back in time with her unless she agrees with him to go to the present, which seems a bit unfair, but whatever. And they relive the trip where eventually, due to what is probably Stockholm Syndrome, because she's the only other person who knows what situation he's in, he eventually falls in love with her. Now, Shane doesn't want to be the other woman, though, so she tells him that he needs to break up with his girlfriend, because she may have been in love with this boy for years, despite never even kissing him, and just having a crush on him, and never letting go of him, because she's the most pathetic character ever. But she's not going to be the other woman. So she tells him, hey, you got to break up with your girlfriend. But Shane hasn't met her fiance in this timeline, so he's irrelevant. But Pilot is still dating the girl he was dating the whole time Shane has ever known her. So he agrees, and he tells Shane that he broke up with her. And then later on, after Shane and Pilot have been dating for a while, it's revealed that he broke up with her through voicemail because he was too much of a coward to actually confront her. And then he blocked her on every social media so she couldn't respond. And it turns out, like pretty much everyone on Earth, she didn't check her voicemail, and she ends up going to London to visit him, and he has a girlfriend named Shane. And you know why he didn't? Because Pilot is the worst, biggest coward ever, and he sucks. I don't like him. He's a coward, and Shane is pathetic. They're perfect for each other. However, this whole scenario makes Shane and Pilot extremely hateable, and I will never be able to root for them because they both suck. Finally, number 1, easily forgiven.
Pleased to make your acquaintance.
Pleasure's all mine.
How do you do? Whoa, whoa! Time out! Let me get this straight. You know her, she knows you, but she wants to eat him. And everybody's okay with this? Did I miss something?
Now, like some of the other things I mentioned, this trope isn't romance specific. However, I've seen it done mostly with protagonists and their love interest, and especially between protagonists and their love interest. And this trope is also the reason for the worst romance I've ever read being the worst romance I've ever read, which I will discuss when I get to the example portion of this. This trope is when a character does monstrous, terrible things, only for it to be quickly swept under the rug like it never happened. I've seen this happen a lot with Mary Sue characters and Gary Stu characters, and it can be in the context of a romance. I mean, I ranted about Layla being a green-eyed monster before, and she also is easily forgiven by Tobias for how she treats him, so she could be an example. Not the worst one, though. We'll get to that. It's coming. Anticipate the anticipatable. That was a good sentence. I stand by that amazing, perfect sentence. Moving on. However, I would like to add that this trope isn't inherently bad. My issue is when the character's actions are excused not only by their love interest, but by the entire book, meaning that the book doesn't even consider them to be that bad. An example of this actually done extremely well in a way I loved would be when Uncle Iroh forgives Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender. The fact that he just forgives him instantly is what makes the scene so great. However, Zuko had to work so hard to change and earn every other character's forgiveness that it doesn't feel necessary for him to do the same for Uncle Iroh, especially since how much we know of Uncle Iroh's character and how much he loves Zuko and tries to help him do what's right. Uncle Iroh wouldn't actually be mad at him. He would be happy that he finally found his way. So this trope isn't inherently bad. My issue is when not only the character easily forgives the protagonist, but the entire book. It's kind of funny I decided to put this trope as my most hated when the scene in Avatar is probably the most emotional I ever got watching an animated show in a positive way. It's definitely the scene I got most emotional about when watching the show. But the reason I put it as my least favorite is because when it's done poorly, it's really done poorly. However, Layla is not the worst example. No, that honor goes to the book Beyond the Red by Ava J. This book starts with our protagonist, Eros. He's a half-human, half-alien man who lives on a human encampment in an alien planet where all the humans are refugees roaming around the desert trying to survive the aliens who hate them and want to kill them. And he's also discriminated against on both sides because he's mixed. Eros lives in this encampment with his adoptive human parents, and at the beginning of the book, aliens attack and slaughter them. But then, out of the dust comes Queen Cora, who spares Eros' death and tells her soldiers to stand down. Was it because she didn't want them to murder the innocent humans? No, it was because she only wanted them to murder the innocent adult male humans. But since his mother was a woman, she's like, well, I'll spare him because she wasn't supposed to die anyway, and that seems like fair. You know, life for life. But she is going to enslave Eros and all the women and children that they didn't kill, because why waste them? You don't let them live so they can have a life. You let them live so you can get free labor, obviously. And this is a side note, but I've seen this in some books where for some reason not killing women and children makes a character morally better. And it's like, ah yes, that male child, once he turns 18, you're morally okay to kill him. Great, you're such a good person. Also, not killing anyone, I would say, is like average morality, like it's kind of the expected morality. So killing men is still worse than average, but whatever. Anyway, Eros is taken back to Cora's kingdom as a slave with all the innocent women and children, and it's revealed that Cora is a garbage queen and all her alien people hate her because she sucks at being a queen. And she's so incompetent she can't trust her people because they all think she's garbage because she is garbage. And so she has the amazing idea to have Eros be her personal bodyguard. Now, there is some logic why he would agree to this and why he wouldn't end up betraying her. Because since she can't trust her own people, she's able to blackmail him to protect her. Because she agrees to free all his people, and having met her twin brother who would take her place if she were to die, Eros knows his people would all be slaughtered. And since she agreed to free his people and never attack them again, it is the better deal to help them. So it makes sense why he would agree to it and not want her to die in this context. And I guess since Cora has such good blackmail, it sort of makes sense that she would pick him. But there's literally no alien who would protect her better, especially because she has no reason to believe Eros can really... Especially because Eros is a half human and the aliens are stronger than humans, which means he would be physically weaker than at least every male alien on the planet, if not every alien on the planet. So, great idea, Cora. You got this physically weaker guy to protect you who hates you. And I mean, it makes sense he would agree to it, but I wouldn't be that secure in my blackmailing abilities to agree to it. Like, if her brother dies, she's next. But anyway, given this situation, realistically, if I was Eros, I would agree to protect her, to protect my people, but I wouldn't be nice to her. I wouldn't really care about her. And so the first night he's guarding her, for some reason he's sleeping on the floor of her room, which... bodyguard, you should be awake while she's sleeping. What the heck? That's so stupid. But she's sleeping in her bed, and she's naked under her sheets because gotta have some sexual tension in this book intended for 12 to 17-year-olds. But so she's sleeping and she ends up having nightmares and making, scared nightmare noises. And, if I was Eros and I was in her room while she's having nightmares, I'd be like, good, I hope you suffer. I hope you can never sleep ever and you have insomnia and you suffer for the rest of your life because you're a piece of shit and I hate you. No, that's not what he does, though. That's what I would have done. That's what I think almost everyone would have been thinking in their head. No, he goes over to her and he comforts her. He holds her in her bed and is like, oh, it's okay. I'll protect you or whatever. Don't be scared. But like, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. This is the dumbest thing ever. He just instantly forgives her because she's hot and she's naked under the sheets. It's probably just horny, but it's so freaking dumb. Why would he comfort her? It's so stupid. This is the worst, dumbest, most garbage romance I've ever seen, and I don't believe it at all. Cora is forgiving instantly for leading an army to murder and enslave his people because she has nightmares. What? She doesn't even apologize. It's not like it's something they have to work to and she discovers that she was in the wrong and she apologizes to him and eventually he grows to forgive her. Nope. instant forgiveness because she's hot and we need some sexy times in this book for 12 to 17-year-olds. So yeah, this might not be a romance-specific trope, but given my example, I hope you understand why I put it in this video, because I've suffered through so much. Anyway, what do you think of these examples? Do you agree or disagree? What are your least favorite tropes? Do you have any examples of these tropes I listed done poorly or even well where you think it's pulled off good? What are your most hated tropes? Please let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching and we'll see you later. Excuse me, plane. Go away, plane. Are you pooping in the background? Can you see? Oh, good, I was blocking her. She's pooping in the back of the video. Osceola, you could go anywhere. She could go anywhere but right there. I will continue blocking her with my shoulder. Go away, plane. Go away, plane. I know I was gloating before, but now I'm regretting wearing shorts. So cold. Oh, hello there. He's got a fur coat. It's not fair. It's not fair. Go away, plane. Go away, plane. Go away. Sorry, my precious buttery goodness. I thank you for your sacrifice. Go away. Be gone. Shoo. Skedaddle.